What I'm going to talk about is the Jaco robot, and as is the best case of things like Blue Peter, here's one I've made earlier. This is the one that we've got today. One of the things that we've learned is that we've faced a number of challenges integrating the robot onto a student's chairs. By doing so, we've realised that currently, in terms of really high-tech integrated technologies, there are no funding mechanisms that we can really sort of rely on to access this type of technology. Likewise, we're finding that the evidence base for this type of technology, although developed in North America, doesn't seem to fit within the NHS criteria for implementation. So how do we develop that evidence base? And likewise, how on earth do we fund these new technologies? When they come online, everybody looks at them. They're usually on the internet. People think it's absolutely fantastic, but there is a point when somebody's actually got to take their checkbook out and pay for it. I work for Hereward College, and this is our shameless blurb, our shameless pitch. It's a slightly innovative organisation in that it was opened in 1971, more as an integrated college rather than a specialist college for people with disabilities. So we had able-bodied and disabled students. As I said, the students that we support today are individuals with physical disabilities, sensory impairments, learning difficulties, brain and spinal injuries, autism and Asperger's, and medical difficulties. So basically a smorgasbord. The students that we've supported over the years have been representative of many of the clients that you'll have supported in your daily practice. Because of the nature of our students, we do tend to use an awful lot of assistive technology. And we, over the years, have developed a paradigm, a means of assessing our students and integrating that technology into the curriculum. With some degree of success, not total success, as you were saying. The assessment process has been an ongoing issue. We've crashed and burned, but we've also had some really, really good successes. As a consequence, we've also got involved in workforce development. When you're working with assistive technology, what we're finding is that, yes, it's absolutely fine to train the individual on how it works and integrate it into their curriculum or their life. However, it all falls down when the people who support the individual do not understand what the technology is for, what to do when it's not charged, plugged in, what it is. And as a consequence, you have an individual who starts to rely on technology, but if they haven't got those concentric circles of care and support, the AT tends to fall down. And if it falls down at the moment that the person really needs it, then they will abandon it. And because we have assistive technology across the 24-hour curriculum, we've realised that we need to integrate AT into an individual's life. And the systems that we've utilised over the years can comprise of different aspects of assistive technology, so they become hybrid systems. What we find is that the hybridisation is quite a complex task, but equally very necessary to enable an individual to function independently across the 24-hour curriculum. So we've looked out across the sort of the world for technologies that would enable our students to function independently as possible. So one of the opportunities we got was to talk to the guys at Canova over in Canada, and we were lucky. And I say lucky, I mean, I've highlighted that because I suppose from our perspective it's a bit of a bone of contention that we were lucky. We contacted an organisation called Empower and asked them for some money, and they were feeling quite generous at the time. They provided us with a cheque to purchase the device. It shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be a matter of luck. What we found was that because it was a robot that was integrated onto an existing wheelchair, I think there's a phrase out there, it ain't as simple as that, because we realised that all of a sudden, some assistive technologies are discrete devices. If you're looking at an AT that enables you to access, say for an argument, a computer, you might plug in a specialist keyboard. That's a discrete implementation, and that's pretty much the implementation in its entirety. What we found was that before we could actually move on, there was a whole series of phases that we had to engage in. First and foremost was the sort of the stakeholder engagement, because the wheelchair that the individuals that we were supporting did not belong to the individual. It was an NHS wheelchair. So the idea of us going and sticking a proprietary system onto an existing wheelchair without asking for permission was a bit of a no-no. So we had to start looking out to our existing stakeholders and engaging with them and saying, look, is it okay? You know, and obviously the first things that were coming back to us were, well, what are the risks associated with this? You know, what damage are you going to do to the individual or the chair? So we needed to calm those particular qualms. So we spoke to our wheelchair services. They enabled us to have access to one of our first candidates' wheelchair. So, as I said, the Jaco process integration is a phased program, and it involves both mechanical, electrical, electronic integration. The first thing we did was we had to actually get the machine onto the individual's wheelchair. And there's a picture on the right-hand side of the actual device seated on one of the mounting plates that we were provided with. The thing about the robot arm is that to control it, that it's best controlled using the control mechanism that the individual uses to use their wheelchair, rather than introducing another layer of control. So the Jaco can be integrated onto Dynamic or Penny and Giles or Curtis and Wright as it's called now. So we were able to take upload the original version of the students' or participants' program and keep that safe. That was a prerequisite from wheelchair services. They didn't want us to change any of the dynamic performance of the wheelchair and not be able to return it to normal functionality afterwards. And John was our first test pilot. And as you can see, he was using a joystick, which was midline on his tray. And he was an absolute star. Unfortunately, John has since passed away, but in the period of time that he used it, he was very, very expert at the end of it. And I think from a human perspective, one of the major outcomes that we found was particularly valuable was that we were looking at the functionality of the device. You know, can you unload or load the dishwasher? Can you carry out sort of activities of daily living? But John was asked at the end of the trial what was his most memorable activity, or what was the thing that stood out most, and he said that he was able to go to his grandfather's 70th birthday and raise a glass, and consequently, you know, he felt that he was integrating back into sort of that family a tradition that, you know, that enabled him to become, you know, a degree normalised again. From a personal perspective, we reached the end of the trial, which was a term, and I think, as I say, from a personal perspective, it was awful taking the thing back. The team did everything absolutely you know, on the button. Everything went well. It was working when it was supposed to work. It was safe. It was integrated effectively within the learning environment and in the care setting. What we didn't understand was the impact it would have when we actually removed it, because, as I said before, you know, these things are horrendously expensive. The Jaco's are around about £35,000. So unfortunately, what we couldn't do is we couldn't say to John, "It's yours, mate. You can take it with you." At the end of the project, obviously there were some lessons to be learned, and we learned that the student population that had tried it out very much said that there is, you know, a demand there. You know, people wanted it. But as I alluded to earlier on, there is no current statutory funding mechanism for this type of technology. And I think one of the debates that we had with our friends in the NHS and in social care was that the activities of daily living that were being undertaken using the robot sort of fell between health and social care sort of responsibilities. So obviously, you know, looking at Maslow's hierarchy, you know, eating and drinking, you know, is an intrinsic need, but equally raising a glass is more of an actualization issue. So, you know, it comes down to the sort of, unfortunately, who's going to pay for it? Where does the responsibility for that technology fall? We did, at the moment that the trial kicked off, engage with our friends within the NHS. So we spoke again to the guys at ACT in Birmingham. Sort of the chicken and egg issue started to kick off. One was that the guys were saying it's very, very expensive. We can't really start thinking about trialling it without an evidence base. And we said, oh, haha, we have an evidence base. We have, you know, an occupational therapy report looking at the efficacy of the technology in terms of costings and human improvement in function. But the NHS quite rightly said, well, that's the Canadian model. It's not. It doesn't have currency over here in the UK. So we got into that cycle. Well, how do we get the evidence base? Well, you need to use the arm. Well, we can't afford the arm, or because the evidence base doesn't exist, we can't pay for the arm. And so one of the questions I want to ask this erudite audience this morning is where, how do we move that forward? So some of the questions that we were asking were, is there a role for this type of provision within Hereward? We developed a skill set, but actually, it's that skill set is not. We're not a business. We don't sell Jaco arms. We don't sell that technology. We did start to develop a relationship with a company called Rahana Life. Now that's some ex-NHS employees who want to bring high-end integrated technologies into the UK. And so the guys at Rahana, with assistance from Hereward really, have started to interact with some of these funding bodies or individuals. We've actually set up a machine for a young man who's received a spinal cord injury, who lives in Jersey. Lord Metrolaw, we were aware of Trelaw College. They've actually had an individual jump out of an airplane to fund one of these devices. Do we have to do this every time to get a piece of high-end tech? Likewise, we're talking to Action Duchenne because of the nature of the technology. But these are sort of the activities that are taking place, but we begin to realise that what does the ecosystem look like? There is an ageing population, and government's talking about an industrial strategy that's going to help individuals live in their own homes for longer. That's absolutely fine, completely agree with that, but what does the ecosystem look like? Because some of these technologies that are going to be coming out from the complex competitions are going to be costly. They always are, because of the fact that they're new, they're innovative, and there's a lot of research and development gone into them. What do we do? Thank you for listening. I mean, I hope that makes sense. I'm around all day, obviously for discussions, but I think although we've been focusing on a specific technology, I think this actually is relevant across all of the sort of new and emergent technologies. It's an issue that sort of gets swept under the carpet, but as technology is becoming more and more prevalent in people's lives, I think we need to address that thorny issue. Thank you.